Get started. Hi all, welcome to the metrics analysis work group. Not to be confused with working group, not to be confused with other groups that may be working. This is a new and special term that we may change later. So in our first meeting today, we probably we'll follow the agenda, but there's going to be some things that we won't look at because we haven't decided what those things are. But the general approach I want to take here is like, take a look at our metrics, take a look at our hypotheses, find data to prove, like to either support those or to falsify those. And at the end of the day, we should figure out some actions that will help move those things as a result. So I have some persistent link items above, but I actually wanted to ask you, gentlemen, what should we be looking about? Like, what are the KPIs we're most concerned about? And we can have infinity, but I just wanted to make sure we're all looking at the same thing, reporting on the same thing every week.
Yeah, so I guess the easiest place to start is our commitment to first reply time and CSAT and next reply time in that order. Maybe CSAT first, but then, you know, if we can kind of figure out a mechanism and, you know, cadence of what we look at, but those should come out of, I would expect, the software weekend review, because it's a weekly view. We could make it a monthly thing as well. There are, if we want to look at it holistically, then there are a list of PIs and KPIs that are kind of generated by SciSense as well. And we've tried to match those things up, but you know, those are the ones that are in the handbook, publicly facing as well. So I would start with FRT and CSAT or SAT, and then so as to not bite off more than we can chew initially. That'll potentially give us a cadence of what we need to look at or how we look at it.
In the past, like you had mentioned in our key review, like requester wait time and total time to resolution had been also trending up, and we wanted to dig in those. Is that something you want to cover in this, or assuming that like our SAT, FRT, and NRT are going to shape those enough?
I think the latter, that they'll shape them enough. I think those things can be indicators, but I don't know that we know enough about them or how we measure them through Zendesk to really make any judgments, if that makes sense.
Okay.
You know, because I anticipate that, you know, requester wait time will be caught up in FRT and NRT, for example. Total resolution obviously is the whole gambit. So if we're improving in both of the first two, it may not specifically address total time to resolution, but it should address the requester wait time if we're focused on the top three. At least that's my perspective.
Ilya, Wei-Ming, is there anything that you specifically wanted to look at outside of our SAT, FRT, and NRT?
Do we want to look at the response times themselves, as in what we have in the key metrics? So median for FRT or median for NRT. Also a good question is, do we want to look at average or median? My perception was always median, because we want to avoid introducing the edge cases into our reports. We want to see the trend, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Is that would that be a kind of a sub indicator of looking at FRT and NRT? Is saying, well, as part of identifying negative trends in FRT, one of the areas we want to look at is median first response. And is that trending up? Is it trending down? But that would be an indicator potentially where we would have to look at, you know, where we would go to look for more detail of the trend. Does that make sense? Because when we think of FRT, right, it's a percentage of time that we meet the SLA. So trending up or down is great, but what we end up needing to look at is, well, are we just not getting to the vast majority of them or whatever? So you have to kind of then get into the deets of like median reply time, for example, would be the first step of, is it trending up or trending down? And then you start to get into indicators of, now we've missed on a couple, but we had a small volume, and that's what messed with the percentages, for example.
Yeah, the medians would be, for instance, an indicator whether we are about to get to a breach situation with SLAs. Let's say the medians go to 24 and above hours, then we assume that we're also going to be breaching our FRTs next month as well. Yeah, it's just more granular view into breach. Yeah. Okay.
Do we have an easy way to get that data now? Like, is that something you're already reporting on?
Yeah, it's in the dashboard support metrics. I've added it. So under each SLA right now, I'll just share my screen. There is a median graph of the response time. So we have median for .com self-managed and LNR. And, oh, I need to change the name. But yeah, we have the median time to respond. Sorry, this is time to resolve. This is the median hour for that metric, for that group. And obviously we see that it mentions a bit. So we increased in our median response times, and we're getting closer to breaches as well. So under every report, there is the median of that report as well right now.
Okay, great. What is our single source of truth? Like what graph are we going to look at every week for SAT, for FRT SLA, and for NRT SLA? Because I could guess, but I guess there's probably multiple ways of pulling this, and so I just want to make sure that we're synced up with, we're all looking at the same thing every time.
The one that I have configured is the one under the SSET tab. Now, this is my responsibility. Can you see my screen, by the way? Because I'm not sure it's sharing the way.
Yeah, we can.
Cool. So the logic here, I will document this. This is part of my OKRs for this quarter to make sure it's in the handbook. But these are basically not security related. So not account related, just .com and self-managed, paying customers, SSET. This is under the SSET tab there. That is on a monthly basis. Now, I've always avoided adding the current month in these, so it doesn't show August because it might kind of skew the results on partial information. And I've shown the information here under our support weekend and review, but maybe this is something that we want to change. So my question to you is, should we add August or should we leave it in support weekend review?
I mean, as we talk about taking a look at things, like I think we should look at the freshest data we have, right? Or is that too fresh that it's not actionable?
It might be inaccurate in percentage wise. This is always my concern because the volume of ticket might not represent the ratio of what is expected by the end of the month. But again, I'm open to, it's too fluctuating, I guess, until the month is closes.
Yeah, I mean, certainly SSAT, I can see like August 1st, we have one ticket, it's bad, it's 0%. And that's not like, we don't actually care about that yet. But for FRT, NRT, is the data tainted in the same way? Can we look at like a rolling past week, rolling past 2 or 3 weeks?
Again, that I put in support weekend review, but I can also add, so in support weekend review, we have the kind of rolling couple of last weeks that I assume that was the right approach. So support weekend review, more granular, and the regular one are the previous months. But we might want to do something different.
So when we talk about it, the way I look at it is these reports, whether it's that dashboard, the support dashboard, or the weekend review, is kind of our indicator to take action, right? So if we're looking at past, like we looked at July and the first week of August, that's too late to really affect July, for example. So I think in order to identify, do we have a trend that we need to go attack? We need to use the software we can review, which needs to be, in my view, the same approach at the data that the monthly accumulates, right? So when we look at key reviews, we're reporting on a monthly basis. When we look at, do we need to take action to a particular metric, that needs to be the software we can review in those more granular reports. Does that help? Didn't make any sense.
Makes sense.
It's early, second cup of coffee, so just jiggling it.
So I guess my question is, are the dashboards as they're presented now, today, what we want to look at every week, or do we need to build something new?
I think what we have today is a good start. We just need to identify kind of those thresholds of when do we think we need to take action based on what we have. And then if we say, oh, well, we can't get to the granularity we need these reports, then we'll work towards them.
I think I do sense a bit of sprawl in this dashboard. So the original intent was to go away from insights because it was moving away, but also to create something more clear. Right now we have, I don't know, 10, 11 tabs there. I think it prevents for some visibility because nobody has the time to go there. I was thinking of creating a new dashboard so we can look at something which is specifically the main ones, SSET, SLA support we can review, and then have a secondary dashboard with the other things. Does that make any sense? And also another question would be, I was thinking of, do we want to break the tabs in this new reorganized dashboard per group? So self-managed.com LNR account, or we want to have tabs that are FRT, NRT, asset. Which kind of grouping we want to maintain there, and do we even need to change what we currently have?
A lot of questions.
Well, I do think that we need a new one. I guess my observation is that we could use, because I think it's getting a bit too unruly, and maybe for some people it might be hard to look at it already.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I guess I've looked at it as, all those are great because at some point you want to look at a top level and then you say, well, top level looks great. And then you dig in and say, well, but we're not, we're not doing so well in this category or something, right? So you need those associated categories to kind of then zero in on where do I need to go focus. And realizing that even trying to zero in on that area could impact other areas because you're using the same people for all of it, right? So you go and say, hey, this is a priority, then that kind of changes the potential dynamic of what's going on, again, depending on what the cause is. So the way I look at it is if we point to what we have existing, that the working group, this work group focuses on to identify trends and take action, we say this tab, this tab, this tab, and we have that consistently, we can either just keep it that way or create a work group dashboard and use those same things. So we're looking at the same data, but not have to be confused by all the various tabs. And then I think those then go into which groups are performing unsatisfactory or up not to par, not to target or whatever, as a filtering mechanism rather than a first stab. Think so? Okay.
So it sounds like we've come full circle. Are we going to build a dashboard? Or are we going to look at the same persistent things each week? I would favor building a dashboard specifically for this, just so we have one persistent link that we're always looking at, and we don't have to, like, thinking of the recording, sharing one dashboard, taking a look at the individual components of that, rather than clicking around and saying, just look at this part, seems a little bit cleaner.
I'd agree, and I think it goes to the software we can review view rather than the overall monthly view.
Okay, so I'll start working on a few POCs and I can show it on our next meeting. So you can bring your comments in. And by the way, the other ones, I'm just thinking we'll create another dashboard that is going to be more drillable with a little bit more granular information. And yeah, okay.
Cool. The next item typically would be status on the hypothesis action items above. So like as we build these out, then we can assign them out as two individuals to gather that data, take a look at and report on that data and whether or not it's consistent with the hypothesis. Since we don't have very many yet, then we can look at building some of those out a little bit later.
I actually do have something to share around status on the hypotheses action items above, coincidentally. I've actually been thinking of looking at answering questions that are kind of like a hypothesis, which is what does the queue look like for the team? How does work look like for the team? And for that, we really need a lot more granular information. So I kind of have been experimenting with collecting very granular data based on scraping the Zendesk API. And I can kind of show you what I've done with my initial exploration. And let me drop you a issue link as well, where I've kind of documented some of this. I'll just share my screen here in a moment. Yeah. So this crazy graph is actually what our work in the self-managed with SLA queue looks like throughout a single day. This was from my Thursday last week. It kind of starts from 1 a.m. UTC from 13th of August all the way to 1 a.m. UTC 14th of August. So the green line is actually the total number of tickets in that queue. It kind of goes up and down. You can look at the axis. These blue jagged lines and red and yellow, those are actually the average SLA for the next 5 tickets to breach. Next 10 tickets to breach. And the dotted lines are actually the average SLA for the next 5 tickets to breach. And the purple bars below are the number of responses we send out. So I was actually just exploring whether this kind of very granular data would be very useful for us. The goal I initially set out to accomplish was to kind of see if there's a way we can use this average time to breach essentially as a proxy measurement for quality of life for support engineers. But I suspect it might actually be useful to answer some of this information as well. So if you kind of look at this, we can see that there are quite a number of periods throughout the day where the average SLA for the next 5 tickets to breach actually dips very low, below 4 hours all the way to below 2 hours. So if you look at the different color lines, so this blue line actually correlates to the APAC hours for customer emergencies. The red line actually correlates to EMEA hours for customer emergencies, and the yellow line actually correlates to the AIMA hours for customer emergencies. So using this, you can kind of get a feel for what the different, I guess, shifts kind of look like. I don't have any firm conclusions out of this data yet, because this is just a single day. I think we'll need repeated observations to really get close. But one thing that kind of strikes me is that we can kind of see that I think the ticket volume is actually okay, because by the end of each shift, we kind of recover, or at the start of the next shift, we kind of recover to a place that's good. I think what's really hitting us is that the distribution of work isn't very, or distribution of effort isn't very even throughout the day. So this is, I'm not sure you can see this, my cursor, but this is about 1 p.m. Let me see if I can actually draw something here. Let's see. Yeah. So this line, which I'm drawing, yeah, I can't draw straight. But anyway, this line is about 1 p.m. UTC. And if you just look at the purple bars, you can start to see that the amount of the density of responses start to decrease after about this line. And you can also see that after this, I think the average SLA kind of increases. I think that's because the team gets the queue to a good sort of position, and then they kind of just let go of it for a bit. And as you can see, the ticket volume increases. Eventually, the average SLA goes down as well until we kind of pick up in the middle of what looks like the AIMER time zone, so about this area. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I suspect it could be like a time zone handover problem, similar to what we are seeing, at the end of AIMER and the start of APEC. But yeah, I don't think you can form any firm conclusions based on just a day's data, but I suspect things like this would actually reveal more insight than what we can through the Zendesk Explorer dashboards. The only problem is I actually haven't figured out if this is valuable enough for me to keep trying. So, I mean, yeah, that's just why I had to share. Just coincidental, I happen to be working on this.
And I do want to ask a few follow-up questions just to understand what you're presenting. So the green line would be the average SLA of a ticket that received an update?
No, so the green line is actually the total number of tickets in the queue at any point in time.
Okay, that's the total number of tickets. And what would be the number then? This is, if 4, it means that it had like 4 open tickets?
No, so for the green line, the axis is actually on the right. So,
okay, sorry.
Yeah, so
okay,
40,
I see.
50, 60, 70, 80.
I see.
And then everything else is on the left. So this would be like, this is actually one, I mean, these lines are essentially
number of updates.
Yeah, number of updates. So 1 per minute, 2 per minute. That's one where we reach 3 per minute over here. Yeah, so these lines, like these lines, and these ones, sorry, these dotted ones, these are the average average SLA for the next 5 tickets to breach for the dotted lines, and next 10 tickets to breach for the solid lines. So yeah.
Okay. So and with this, we are calculating how loaded is the queue, right? Is that how bad the situation is supposedly in the SLAs?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
That was what I wanted to try to get to. Because if you are SLA hop, or if you are kind of support engineer that works from the top of the queue, if the top few tickets are constantly breaching, you kind of feel like the queues are really bad for you. So I wanted to try to find a measurement that captures that feeling, I guess.
Yeah, well, this is good stuff. I mean, some of this we can definitely get in Explore, but some of this not. I think it does correlate somewhat to median response times, because if the median response times do increase, then we would obviously have lots of more breaching tickets or getting to breach in the queue. But this is great information. About your observation of the morning of Eastern time and evening of EMEA, we can see it in the ticket volume, and you can also see it there. This is the most loaded time of our day. So the afternoon of EMEA, the 2 p.m. and the morning of East Coast, 9 a.m., it's always historically the most loaded part of the day. So that might be related, but I'm sure there's more information to gather from there. Do you mind if we schedule a kind of a chat maybe this week so we can look at this later and see maybe we can import some of this into Explore and maybe we can create something? Cool.
My next step for this would actually be trying to load this into like something like InfluxDB or something, just so I don't have to manually do the number crunching. But yeah, happy to set up a chat and see what we can do.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. This is great stuff. Thanks, Wei.
Just stop sharing here.
Yeah, thanks. I saw that yesterday in the issue. It's exciting stuff. I'm interested in the like the number of replies per minute. I think that it'll be interesting to see kind of like where our engineered density is. I think we could probably guess based on people's locations, but it'd be nice to see that backed up by the actual work being done. Frequency of meetings. Wei-Ming, Ilya, Tom, me, we're in very different parts of the world. Does a time exist when we can all meet? I think that as we develop our hypotheses and start looking at data, we can get more async. But I do want to have like a consistent time. I'm suggesting weekly where we can take a look at and report on the data. But I also don't want you to have to stay up till like bajillion o'clock with me or Ilya.
I'm actually pretty happy with staying up late rather than getting up early. So this time looks okay for me.
Ilya, is this an okay time for you?
No, it's perfect.
Tom?
Yeah, I can do earlier if you want, but this works for me as well. So,
Wei-Ming, would you prefer earlier? I can also do earlier.
No, I think this time is good. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on one piece that I'm not sure how to get the data, but Lyle kind of mentioned it in density of available staff. And we talk about the handoff periods of afternoon EMEA, early morning MER, afternoon MER, early morning APAC. And I don't know that we've got kind of a gut feel of where we have people, but that feel also assumes that everybody's online all the time, right? So it would be wonderful if we could figure out what our ratio of available staff to that ticket volume that Wei-Ming showed, or however we put it together, because that ratio, I think, would help us determine or predict, right? If we say, well, now this ratio changes because these 3 people in this particular time zone are going to be out, we need to anticipate that, and in order to stay up on SLAs, because that type of stuff will also, I think, stress out SLA hawks when they've got nobody to turn to in a particular time frame, right? I don't know how best to get that data. Obviously Bamboo's the source of truth for where we have people, but that doesn't necessarily equate to the times people are working. So
Maybe we can, I'm thinking we do have the Slack bot Ninja that might be able to have an API for us to fetch from, but I'm thinking if we maybe go over it from the other direction and say, thinking out loud, maybe we can calculate how many people we need at each hour of day, and then just make sure that we have them.
Oh, that would be a great algorithm to have.
I mean, just thinking how we can get to that figure is an engineer can have an X amount of updates per day. We have an X amount of tickets coming in, something in that sort, and saying we need these amount of engineers to be able to respond to these amounts of tickets. And then we can kind of say in each hour of the day or within each region, we need to have at least these amount of people available.
That's the layer of granularity that, we kind of take a look at it from on average or median. This is the flow of tickets, right? And this is the number of people we need to have to be within SLA. And then is where we're staffing, taking that into account. And as we hire and that sort of thing, are we asking people to work the right set of hours in some grouping, right, to equate to that volume of people to tickets, right? Because we're so distributed that it's hard to keep track of, do we have all the right people in the Eastern, or in the afternoons of EMEA and the mornings of the mayor, from a hiring perspective and a staffing perspective, to be constantly up on the volume of tickets that we see on average.
I guess it also does depend on the specific SLA requirements, because if it's a bronze low ticket or a 24-hour SLA, then we would need different staffing than if it's a premium 4-hour SLA.
Exactly.
So I can try to gather information about the distribution of different ticket types per hour of the day, together with incoming ticket volume. But I mean, the biggest question I have in my mind is how much an engineer can update on a given day. So let's say we have 20 engineers, how many tickets can they ultimately update? Because we don't want to say to people, you can't go on PTO because we don't have enough people. And that's something that yeah, I don't even know how to approach that.
Yeah. So for me, probably the worst at oversimplifying, but to me, it's the law of averages. So we build a staffing model, and the staffing model to various pieces have come back and said, well, we're overstaffed, right? Well, if we're overstaffed, then we shouldn't be having these SLA problems. So, right. So if that's the case, if we're not overstaffed, are we adequately staffed or understaffed in certain regions? And do we adjust what we're staffing to from a model perspective and do it more granularly to regions? So right now it's, we're just taking a swag of, 40, 60, 20 kind of an approach in regions that somewhat correlates to the times of ticket creations, right? And saying that that's good enough. So now I'm questioning, is that good enough? Do we need to go to the next layer or layers?
I guess the granularity here might also require looking at the different groups. So specifically, we had this 700 influx in .com for June, July, and so we dropped on the on asset and SLA, and also on LNR specifically, which is right now at 700 tickets as well. So it's a fifth of our tickets are in LNR, and they are suffering. They are 60 to 70% FRT and NRT, and .com as well. Specifically for self-managed, the SLAs are quite good. They're at 95, 98% kind of persistently. So maybe that's also a consideration. Maybe it means we need to move along faster with Tom's area of focus idea and to aggregate both groups. Possible that removing the free ticket support would help the .com. But I think,
sorry, Lyle, we're working on a bunch of hypotheses at the same time.
Yeah, to document all of it.
I'm writing them down.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I mean, we can definitely move into that section. So I do want to be mindful of time. I only scheduled 40 minutes, so we actually only have about 7 minutes left. But this part is something that's very asyncable. I thought of some of these as I was making dinner last night, so we can just write them down. What we can, I think probably the assignment for this week is to come up with different hypotheses, put them in this document. And if you already know what data we need to look at, then go ahead and put what that data is. And if you get excited, go for it. Assign yourself one of these, add some data, and we can do that as quickly as you want. The one thing that I think is harder to kind of async talk about is our exit criteria. Like, when do we want to disband? When will we have succeeded in what we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I'll think about it. One of them, to me, off the top of the head, is the criteria to regroup. Right? Is we identify these thresholds are hit for this amount of time, we need to regroup it, or a work group needs to regroup to go out and identify, right? Or the X criteria is when these thresholds are hit, these things happen. Maybe the work group doesn't need to, but we assign managers to go off and within a week have a trend or whatever. So that, I think, would be one of the exit criteria if we can define that.
Agreed. I think one of the things that we should have done this sooner, or we should have done something sooner. And so figuring out what that thing is, maybe it's this thing, maybe it's a different thing, I think is an important part of this work group.
And I think the other, we talked about it early and just kind of went back and forth, and dashboards are going to get created, and Ilya is going to put his incredible mind together with all these dashboards. But one of the extra criteria is we have that consistent thing to go back to if we do see a trend based on those thresholds of the first exit criteria, right? That these things are reusable for each of these situations to, one, identify it, and then two, take action.
Wei-Ming, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I have the same thoughts as Tom here, which I'm just thinking maybe one of the exit criteria should be we have identified a few metrics which are more actionable on a more short-term basis in terms of maybe from week to week we actually are able to have some kind of lagging indicator, or even better leading indicator that indicates to us we need to take some kind of action. So yeah, I guess if you want to generalize it, is to kind of reduce the latency or find a matrix which will help us reduce the latency in which we start to take action, if that makes sense.
It's our baseline. 3 months. Like, is that where we're at right now? Reduce it to 1 week.
Are we actually at 3 months?
When did things start going down? Like, kind of May. So yeah, I think that's a good one. Any other thoughts?
So just for me to understand, we're thinking about some specific thresholds that are going to cause the group to regroup.
I don't think at this point we're overly prescriptive that it has to be a group, and we may, in looking at the data, discover appropriate actions. So I mean, if FRT is going down, maybe the appropriate action is get more FRT hooks. Maybe that's not the appropriate action, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like, something's happening, managers, assemble. Like, it could be much more direct action.
Yeah, and I think that's, that's the aspect. I think of it in kind of the perfect world is a red flag goes up when we've hit up whatever we defined as the thresholds over a certain amount of time. And that red flag identifies, take these actions, right? And, and initially, if those were red flagged in the manager syncs on a weekly basis, then we could discuss actions in those manager syncs. But it could be on an hourly basis as well, right? Something happens in APAC and a red flag goes up, then John and Wei-Ming and Jane and VG all have to kind of figure out, okay, we need this to happen. So, robotic.
Okay, I will put those together in a merge request, and we can kind of discuss a little bit more in there. I think that sounds like a good start. Any closing thoughts before we disband? Is everybody's next actions clear? I want you to take a look, think about hypotheses. Ilya is going to work on a dashboard specifically for this work group that will summarize our top of line KPIs. And if you get excited and want to start looking at data, feel free to dive into your hypotheses and add any findings either in an issue or in the stock directly.
Cool, thanks a lot.
Alrighty, I'm going to upload this recording to YouTube unfiltered and make it an unlisted video. I'll make an MR summarizing this meeting and make the meeting repeat. Oh, sorry, actually, you said it, Wei-Ming, but I missed it. Is this time is okay, or would you prefer an hour earlier?
Yeah, this time is okay for me.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty, thank you, folks. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone.